Hey everybody, it's Tao at the Forge, and M21 just came out yesterday, and if you know me, you know I love jank and alternate win conditions and all sorts of wacky stuff in Magic the Gathering. Like, my favorite deck archetype is Mill, that makes me maybe hated by many, but I still love it. I think it makes Magic a lot of fun to play. So when M21 came out, I saw the card 9 lives and I just had to brew around it. So hopefully you guys will enjoy this. Now before I show you guys the deck, I just want to remind you that if you do love what I do or even like it a little bit, then it doesn't cost you anything to like or subscribe, share the video, or just support the channel in any way possible. Even leaving a comment helps to support the channel. So make sure you do one of those things, and it really helps. Not only does it help my self-esteem, just joking, but also it does actually help to bring viewers to the channel. We're almost at 500 subscribers, and I think it'd be nice to be able to get up there and see some more growth. So anyways, let's take a look at 9 lives. Okay, so 9 lives, just to go over it, is a 3 mana, so 1 and 2 white enchantment with hexproof, so your opponent can't do anything to it unless they had something that just said destroy all enchantments, which does not exist in this format. Right, I've checked. So if a source would deal damage to you, prevent that damage and put an incarnation counter on 9 lives. When there are 9 or more incarnation counters on 9 lives, you exile it. When 9 lives leaves the battlefield, you lose the game. So to put it in a nutshell, what it does is you put this down. Anytime you would normally receive damage, that's not life loss. Just so you know. So if something says like there's that life gain, life loss deck where what's the name, Vino or whatever, where it says like every time you gain life, your opponent loses that life. That's not damage, right? So this does not prevent that, right? But anyways, when there are 9 or more incarnation counters on 9 lives, then instead of getting a damage, you get a counter. Now, if you were to get 9 damage, you still get 1 counter, right? So this will absorb a lot of damage for you. But then when there's 9 counters on it, then it leaves the battlefield. When it leaves the battlefield, you just lose the game. So you ran out of your lives. All right, so you got to be careful in playing this, but what we want to do is put this down and have our opponents just kind of beat on us, and then at the end swap it out with role reversal and give it to our opponent. Right, so what we want to do is exchange control of 2 target permanents that share a permanent type, and so what we have to do is we want to make sure our opponent has an enchantment, and if they do, that's really good. And then we just swap that enchantment for role reversal. Now, I know what you're asking. You're like, well, what if your opponent doesn't have an enchantment? Well, that's why we have Eyes Everywhere. So Eyes Everywhere is 3 mana for us, and at the beginning of our upkeep, it helps us to scry 1. So what that does, it helps us look for the things that we need. So we can dig for 9 lives, we can dig for role reversal or things like that. And because this deck strategy is to slow the game down, what we're going to do is, like almost always, we get up like more than 6 mana. So then once our opponent can put a threat down, especially a big threat, what we can do is just use the Eyes Everywhere and take it over. Right, so then we can exchange control of Eyes Everywhere and target non-land permanent. So let's say they put like for instance, my opponent put that 8/8 Godzilla thing down, or one time had Drakuseth down, and I was able to just exchange it for Eyes Everywhere. So yeah, you give it to them, you give them the scry, but then you get their like 8/8 or 7/7 fly or whatever, right? It's just devastating. Right, so Eyes Everywhere is actually a really sweet card. I think that it's underplayed, right? So. But the more important thing is that Eyes Everywhere not only can steal your opponent's best stuff, right, but now they have an enchantment. And because they have an enchantment, then you can trade it using role reversal for 9 lives. So you can give them the 9 lives in exchange for Eyes Everywhere. So there's actually a lot of cool synergies here. Before I continue, and before I forget, make sure you watch out for Questing Beast. Okay, because Questing Beast says that damage can't be prevented, and that actually really hurts a lot because it just basically turns off our 9 lives. So if you see a Questing Beast on the battlefield, you have to get rid of it like before anything else, right? Or there's other ways. I guess you could use like Ruined Halo or whatever and give yourself protection against Questing Beast. Okay, so anyways, I'm going to go through the deck and just show you why what cards are there and what and different synergies that might you guys might find. Okay, so we're going to start off. We have a 1 of Light of Hope. Light of Hope is just interesting because it can destroy target enchantment. You do not want to destroy your 9 lives, okay, because then it leaves the battlefield and you just lose the game. Alright, so you don't want to do that. That's actually just a way for us to destroy our opponents. A lot of people are playing those shrine decks now, so it's a way of destroying the shrine deck if your opponent really has one, or sometimes they just have a really good enchantment that that you need to get rid of. We don't have any creatures, so we're never going to put a +1/+1 counter on creature, but also for 1 mana we can gain 4 life, which could keep us in the game as well. This, you know, it's not one that's like this one I might substitute for another Ruined Halo eventually, but I don't have another Ruined Halo, so I'm reluctant to spend a lot of wild cards on this one. So if I had a second Ruined Halo, I would probably take this out and put a second one in. Alright, now let's go just to the next one. So once we've given our opponent, obviously we can't give it to them, we have to give it to them at sorcery speed. And so what we're going to do is we need a way to finish off our opponent, right? So we need a way to get like those extra damage. We want to get this to like 7 or 8 life counter or incarnation counters and then trade it off. So that's a little tricky to do. I can tell you this deck is actually quite hard to play. There's a lot of games where I've lost, but I actually could have won just because I misplayed in learning kind of all the intricacies of this deck. So I mean, I think it actually has a fairly good winning percentage. It's just very difficult to play. It's easy to make mistakes on it, right? So anyways, so what we need to do is be able to finish off our opponent with 1 or 2 extra damage, and that's where Shock and Omen of the Forge come in. So what we're going to use is, these can be early game removal, but they can also be used to finish off our opponent later on. Alright, so as I said, there's Ruined Halo, so you choose a card name, you have protection from the chosen card name, right? So basically what we can do is, if our opponent has like a big threat out there, we can give ourselves protection. It does not give our Planeswalkers protection, so we have a Teferi, but it does not give him protection, right? So we have to be careful of that, but overall this can actually be a really good card that can really prevent you from being targeted by like a big beater. Right, so now we have to find the balance here, because once we get 9 lives out, we do want to be targeted, we do want to take that damage, right? And we have to basically not let on that we're going to donate this to our opponent. We want them to think that we're just kind of stupid and we put this 9 lives out as a strategy, and you know, and that basically we're kind of stupid, right? And so, and at the last minute we want to swap it out, right? So anyways, that's how we're gonna do it. But Ruined Halo is good because like it can protect us from questing beasts, but also could protect us from other things, so we don't get killed too quickly. Alright, so on top of that we got a 2 of Swift Response, which is just destroy target tapped creature, because remember, we're trying to slow things down, and like for instance, a lot of times you could be at like 6 counters and your opponent's attacking with 3 creatures, in which case then you can use Swift Response to get it to 8, you know, before you donate it or whatever to your opponent, right? So Swift Response is actually a good one. If you are looking at getting rid of Light of Hope, a good another one that you could put in is Swift Response as well, right? In fact, like, I don't know, I might actually switch those out. I rarely ever use Light of Hope, but the only problem is that when you face that Shrine deck, it's almost impossible to deal with, right? Because like Eyes Everywhere takes too long to steal everything from them, and by that time they've made you discard, and like you're getting lots of life loss and stuff like that. So just early game being able to destroy some shrines is pretty nice. Okay, after that we have Birth of Meletis. Birth of Meletis is just good because it gives us like an extra planes, so it helps to thin our library, it gives us extra land, it gives us a little blocker, you know, so again, this is just a nice one to have. Also gains us 2 life, which helps us keep us in the game a little bit longer. Overall, it's just a good value card for 2 mana. Like, you know, you get a 0/4 blocker, you get a land, you get, you know, the 2 life, so overall there's just a tremendous value here. You know, it looks like a hot mess of just random crap, but everything in here is actually pretty good, and I think I've got them in the right proportions. Okay, we already talked about Omen of the Forge, but Omen of the Forge also can help you scry, and that scry ability is, I found, really good, because a lot of times, you know, like especially later in the game, like you might get this and destroy something early that your opponent's going to punish you with, but then later on, you can use this to dig for the cards that you really, really need, right? So, especially that could be the role reversal or the eyes everywhere or whatever, right? And a lot of games, like I've won just on my opponent's end step when I scryed into this, scryed into like a Shatter the Sky or something like that I really needed. So anyways, Omen of the Forge, great card to put in there. Banishing Light is, again, just to get rid of things that your opponent can't really deal, or you can't really deal with, or just to get rid of stuff for your opponent. It's also something that you could like potentially, like, your opponent could like do things with it. So I don't know, like, originally I had put this in because I had the spear of whatever that spear is that it makes things lose hexproof. So I wanted to be able to donate the 9 lives to my opponent and then use the spear to the shadow spear to get rid of hexproof, and then banishing light it and take it away and instant kill my opponent. But I found, like, there's just too many moving parts. Like, already this is a 3-card combo, so you have to get, like, for instance, you have to get like eyes everywhere, you have to trade it, and then you also have to get the 9 lives, and then you also have to roll reversal. So, like, that's actually really hard. And then to add the spear in as well, so then you'd also have to need the spear, and then you'd also have to need banishing light, is just too much, and it was too hard to do to your opponent. So I found that it just made it too cumbersome to do it that way, so I took them out. And in early games, I had a lot of proliferate creatures, which would allow me to proliferate onto 9 lives and try and give myself those counters and then donate it. But I found in general you don't really need to do that. We can stall the game, and I found in the playtesting that I just wasn't actually ever using those creatures for anything. And because they're 1/1s, then basically your opponent just destroyed them right away anyway, so it wasn't really worth it. Okay, so Banishing Light was a really good card to put in there. 9 lives, we talked about. Eyes everywhere. I don't underestimate the power of eyes everywhere. Being able to take your opponent's stuff is actually pretty amazing, right? Now, Teferi is amazing in this deck. Okay, now a lot of you guys might think, well, once 9 lives gets up to 8, if you're not ready yet, you could use Teferi to bounce it back to your hand and then play it again. You can't do that, right? Because once you bounce it back to your hand, then it left the battlefield and you lost the game, right? So don't use Teferi to bounce 9 lives back to your hand, right? But there are some things you can do. So for instance, there's been many games where I've had eyes everywhere down, okay, and then later on I play Teferi, right? Then, or even in the same turn, you trade your eyes everywhere for one of your opponent's things, and then you play a Teferi the next turn, and you bounce the eyes everywhere back to, because it brings it back to its owner's hand, right? So return one target artifact, creature, or enchantment to its owner's hand, not the controller's hand, right? So then the eyes everywhere comes back to you, and then you can play it again, and then do it again next turn. So you can actually use this to cycle Teferi. With Teferi to cycle and steal a couple of the permanents that your opponent has, and especially if they're really good ones, that could really start to hurt your opponent, right? So Teferi with eyes everywhere is actually pretty good, but it's also good with Omen of the Forge, because Omen of the Forge is that 2 damage that you need, so you could play that 2 damage, right, and then use Teferi to bounce it back to your hand, right, and then you can get another 2 damage again, right? So I mean, it's actually pretty good overall. Like, I never actually bounced Birth of Meletis, but you could also potentially bounce Ruined Halo. So let's say you give yourself protection against something, you eventually shatter the sky against it, it's no longer a threat, then you can give yourself a different protection that might help you stay in the game. All right, so that is actually pretty sweet. Okay, and then finally we've got 2 other cards. Shatter the Sky is just our oh shit board wipe. I think in general, this is a really great card for us to have, because we need to control. We want to take damage for 9 lives, but we gotta live long enough to take that damage, right? So essentially, what we have here is a losing strategy. We just want to control how fast we lose, right? And then trade that strategy to our opponent at the last second. And then finally, we have Heliod's Intervention, where we can destroy X target artifacts or enchantments. Mainly, this is here because I face a lot of those shrine decks again, and those shrine decks, like, there's just nothing we can do against them, right? Like, because they get those shrines down and just wrecks us. So what we can do early on is we can, if we have the Heliod's Invention, we can start using that, and then we can blow up all their shrines, and then our opponents, that can keep us in in the early game, and then after that, what we can do is we can start using our eyes everywhere to trade them for their shrines and just steal their shrines, right? So overall, this deck is, I think, pretty good. It took a lot of incarnations in order to build this, but I think I've got it to a place where it's actually, pretty sweet. Overall, we've got a fairly eclectic land package where we got a different land. So 3 plains, 3 islands, 1 mountain, 4 fabled passages, just because our mana is just so wacky that we need to be able to find what we need right away. 4 hallowed fountains, 4 steam vents, 4 sacred foundries. In general, we don't want to play many tapped lands unless you absolutely have to, but in the because we're needing to control things so carefully, right? Like getting, like, for instance, a tapped mana, when you need to shatter that sky on this turn is just devastating. So, and we have lots of ways to gain our life back. So, and once we get 9 lives down, we don't take damage from creatures. So, overall paying the shock cost for these is not so bad, right? And very often, like, you can play them on turn 1 and turn 2 when it doesn't matter, right? And then it's not the end of the world if you have these. So we have one of Karn's Bastion, and basically what that is just for us, if our opponent, like, there's been some games where I eventually get this out, we stalled the game so our opponent just can't do anything against us, right? Like, let's say they just have like 1 main creature, we use Ruined Halo to stop it. Our opponent knows that we have eyes everywhere on them, and so, like, they're not willing to play their 1 threat or whatever, right? So the game has stalled, and then what we can do is use Karn's Bastion to basically to proliferate us up to these counters up to like 7 or 8 or whatever. You got to be careful, especially if you're playing against red, because if you put yourself to 8 and your opponent shocks you, then you're just dead, right? But what we can do is, in that case, actually, if we have Teferi, you can use this +1, right? And then you can instant speed roll reversal on it, and well, so as soon as it gets 9, I have not tried this, but it should work. You got to be careful on the stack. This would go on the stack, and then you give it to your opponent, right? But what I would actually do is just instant speed give it to your opponent, and then try and use like a shock or Omen of the Forge to finish your opponent off. So anyways, I will have the deck list for this in the link in the description. Stay tuned. I will have some examples of some gameplay following, so let's go take a look. Okay, so here we have my first match here against my opponent. Opponent's playing mono black, and yes, I did put the My Little Pony sleeves down just because I figure if I'm playing jank, well, I might as well put like the crappiest sleeves I've got, so, or just funny sleeves. So anyways, then we're going to play this down. I need to quickly ramp my mana, and I've got my 9 lives. Now, what I found in general is that, like, there's going to be a couple different types of win conditions you have, and I should have mentioned this earlier. One is where you just stall the game and your opponent just quits because they get pissed off. Another one is where you actually win with the actual 9 lives win condition, and another one is where you actually end up just beating your opponent with their own creatures that you traded for. So anyways, let's take a look what happens here. This one, our opponent's got a whole bunch of Whisper Squads. They have got their serrated scorpions down. They're swinging out. Okay, great. And basically what I'm doing is I'm just roping them in, trying to get them to commit all their creatures here. Now, what I have is also, so you can see I have a Grateful Apparition, and that's that proliferate creature, but I since took it out. I found that overall, like, I never really used it, and it's just a crappy 1/1. It just didn't give me the value I thought it would get, so don't try and use that. And that's instead took the 4 of those out and put on the Heliod's intervention, and also the Ray of Light, or whatever 1 mana anti-enchantment package I have. And so what you can see here is this is one of those games where our opponent is just really salty because the game is getting stalled out. They're just essentially just waiting, right? And I'm just going to play normally. I never just misplay with this. I just assume that our opponent's going to continue playing, but they're just going to rope me here because they're pissed off. You can see, like, I'm playing this at like 2.5 to 3 times speed, and you can imagine how long I had to wait for this. Right, so opponent's just going to go and they're going to rope me, and then I end up winning with this one just because I think I just frustrated my opponent to the point where they just felt like they couldn't really do anything. Right, even though I didn't have the win condition, and I don't think they play any enchantments. So in this one, we are playing against an opponent, and we have a better package here. So I've got my eyes everywhere, a little bit of protection with Shatter the Sky. I'm playing my shock lands early because I've got no early plays anyways, and I don't want to take those two damage. So playing them down, I got the Fabled Passages down, but if I play a Plains next turn, then I don't have to actually worry about getting the tap lands off of it. And so here I'm gonna play this. Play eyes everywhere, and that way I can start scrying for everything I need. My opponent's just got a 1/1 here, which is not a huge deal, so I'm not too afraid of it. Okay, but you can see what they're doing is actually something really cool. They're using it to pump up. I actually really like that combo that they're doing, right? But I just can't deal with that, so I got to destroy it. Right, so we're gonna play this. Hopefully, like their creatures don't have haste, right? So I need to deal with that right away. So I'm going to throw it down to Teferi, bounce it back, right? And then I'm going to play my Fabled Passage. Alright, so then you can see very quickly I'm getting up to the mana I need, and I can basically use this to, I can trade. I don't mind if I lose my Teferi here, but I can eventually just actually trade my eyes everywhere. But I actually need the damage on the 9 lives, so I'm going to let him just attack me for a bit. I still have that that Grateful Apparition, which really kind of sucks. It's not a really great card to have there, but you know, it is what it is, right? I had it at the time, and you know, I took it out. So, all right, but there you can see I took away my opponent's creature. Right, I don't really have any ways to attack my own creature, and so I can't really punish it. But I can still let my opponent still come through and get those counters on the 9 lives. So I'm just letting him build up the counters. I've got a shock, which is really nice. You know, and my opponent now has the eyes everywhere, and so I can trade this pretty much any time. And I've got the shock to finish him off. So I'm going to let the damage through. No blocks. Okay, so you got it to 5, and I gotta be kind of careful, right? So Banishing Light against one of these, because I want to be able to control that my opponent's going to basically just do 1 damage at a time, right? So you know, I don't want to necessarily like have to worry about whether or not I'm going to get 1 or 2. Okay, so here my opponent, yep. So opponent's gonna try and give me more damage. Now I'm at 7. Okay, so now's the time. And you can see then we're going to roll reversal, give him eyes everywhere, attack with his own creatures for 2, and bang bang, 9 lives, I win. Okay, so this is the last match we're going to be looking at, and in this one we're actually playing a guy with a pretty awesome name, but I don't want to necessarily out my opponents here, so unless you rope me or do something salty, I'll blur your name. So opponent's playing Augur of Bolas. I got my Fabled Passage down. Right, I'm looking for. I don't mind necessarily always shocking unless I have to, but I don't want to have tap land unless I need it. Right, so like, oh, I don't want to have tap land if I can avoid it. So now I'm gonna just play this down, get down my eyes everywhere, so I can start scrying, and you know, I can block a little bit. That Spellgorger Weird is a problem, right? So I've got Teferi, not Teferi, sorry. I do have Teferis in hand. Okay, so I'm going to start playing my 9 lives, and this way my opponent can start, you know, giving me some damage here, right? You can see in this version of the deck, I actually took out those Grateful Apparitions and put Heliod's Intervention down, and with the Teferi, I can actually start bouncing my opponent's stuff and trying to slow them down a bit, right? What I'm trying to do is actually get enough mana down till I can use the eyes everywhere and start to and then trade eventually with something for my opponent. Alright, so we're going to see what happens here. They're just attacking the Teferi. Okay. And we're trying to control how many counters goes on eyes everywhere. This is why sometimes it's difficult. I'm going to pay the 2 life here. And the reason why is because then later on, what I can do is I can actually, well, here I can cast 2 things. But then later on, I can actually use that to to use the Eyes Everywhere to steal something like that Spell Gorger Weird. Now my opponent now has played what's it called, this enchantment, which is a huge mistake of theirs, because now I can go roll reversal on them. Now the only thing you have to be worried about is that your opponent might have a counter, especially because they're playing blue. So I still got to rope them in. I only have one counter on 9 lives, so I gotta still get more counters. And just this one, okay, yeah, so I'm going to destroy it. That was probably a mistake, but what I'm going to do probably eventually is just trade the roll reversal, trade the Eyes Everywhere for that Spell Gorger Weird or something like that. Right, so lots of damage coming in. That's okay. I kind of need that. Okay. All right, so we're going to go and let's see, Banishing Light on, yeah, the Electromancer. Okay. I don't mind. See, this is the thing, is that you're kind of, okay, so we got Firemind's Research coming down, another enchantment. That's really good. The thing is, you want to take damage. So it's so tough, right? Because you gotta control how much damage you actually take, right? So, anyways, my opponent's attacking. That 7/7 Spellgorger Weird doesn't do anything, but my opponent now has given me basically. They have an enchantment down. I can trade my 9 lives at 6, so I only need to put 3 more counters down. And now I have their Firemind's Research, so what I can do is I can actually start using their counters to draw cards and do other things with the Firemind's Research. Alright, so there we go. Okay, so I'm going to remove 2 counters, draw a card. I got a shock. Okay, so I can shock my opponent. And I think my opponent is just pretty much done here. So there's 6. Okay, I'm going to shock my opponent. I can trade the Eyes Everywhere. Yeah, that's fine. They can shock me if they want. Okay, trade. Oh, draw another card. Get a Birth of Meletis. Okay. Yeah, you can keep shocking if you want. Okay, play out the last planes. Alright, opponent now has that Augur of Bolas. They have the Goblin Electromancer. They're going to hit me for 1. But now I can steal that Electromancer. Alright. Shatter the Sky does not really help because I want to steal their stuff. Alright, so see the scrying is just super helpful. Alright, so then we go trade for the Electromancer. Alright, our opponent is thinking, considering, oh no. And then, yeah, basically just play the planes and we can just wait. Technically, I could use the Light of Hope to destroy that Eyes Everywhere. Yep, so they don't get to scry. Alright, well, they do get that 1 scry. I should have actually blown up the Eyes Everywhere on the turn before. But okay, so our opponent is going to cast something huge. Alright, and let's just see what they do, because if they... Yeah, so they get to refill their hand, but they're tapped out here. So now, I got an Omen of the Forge. There's 1 damage. Okay, and I can basically use my Eyes Everywhere to steal their Augur of Bolas, attack with the Goblin Electromancer, and then finish him off with Omen of the Forge. So there you go. And bang bang, another win. So, 9 lives. It is a thing. So that's it for my video on the 9 lives deck that I built. I hope you guys enjoyed watching it, and I encourage you to give it a try. There's a lot of good stuff in here and it's super fun to play. I'd say it's not tier 1 competitive, but when you win, it's actually pretty good, and it wins about maybe 50% of the time. So it's not like a losing deck, but it's not necessarily the most winning deck either. But it is a blast to play this deck. It's super fun. I would also say one thing is that it's very hard to play this deck, and so you got to really be careful on how you play. It's being very meticulous in how you control your opponents and how much damage they can get. So everything kind of matters here, but there's a ton of synergy, and I really like this deck a lot. So I'm glad I was able to put it together. I've had a ton of fun playing it. So I hope you do too. Let me know what you think in the comments. Remember to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.